Virginia is not talked about nearly enough. I think that it has an appeal to more of an audience than it has found in the 8 years since its release, and I want more people to play it so I can talk to them about it. So I'm going to give the best recommendation I can give, as well as my interpretation of this sometimes very abstract game for those who have or wind up giving it a shot. I only discovered Virginia looking at lists of the best walking simulators while hyperfixated in the genre a couple years ago. These works are all confident that their art, soundscape, and presentation is enough to pull their audiences into a world and story without an abundance or sometimes any traditional gameplay mechanics. Some hate all of these, most will have one or two that they find don't add enough interesting stuff to counter what they remove, but it's often meant an elevation of mechanics that never got to take center stage in other games, and in the best cases, it creates things not seen outside the genre. Virginia is pretty much the last thing, with the caveat that it took some help to get there. About a year before I played Virginia, a frequent commenter and friend, Cheesecake Militia, recommended 30 Flights of Loving. This is a very short indie project by solo developer Brendan Chung, where we see the perspective of a thief and his crew carrying out a heist as it goes awry. What's of significance here to Virginia is the adaptation of a jump cut from cinema. In film, when a cut occurs between two shots without a significant change in angle, we understand this to signify a jump in time. 30 Flights of Loving adapts this concept to first-person video games. This has an added effect not present in film. The player controls their camera, and that control is wrenched away from them with each jump cut. It works great here to convey both a heist and life spiraling out of control. Virginia builds explicitly off this effect, thanking Brendan Chung in the very first words of the game's credits. It's not the only thing it borrows, also getting much of its plot and aesthetics from popular 90s TV. Where 30 Flights borrows from heist media, Virginia borrows from Twin Peaks and X-Files for a plot of small-town mystery and inter-FBI politicking in 1992. This is only the stage setting though, and where I've found other recent media has borrowed heavily from this era of 90s mysteries without enough of their own original ideas, Virginia both successfully evokes its inspirations and shapes the rest of its story around themes and emotions all its own. Virginia communicates a ton of information right from the get-go. Our protagonist, Anne Tarver, starts staring herself down in the mirror, putting on lipstick. We can infer some discomfort and the impression that she is putting on a face for the benefit of the rest of the world from her expressions. Her anxiety is reinforced as the score builds suspense as she waits in line for what we eventually learn is her graduation from the FBI Academy. We get a big contrast to Anne in Cord McCarran, the deputy director of the FBI who hands Anne her badge. He is in his element here. He is comfortable being the focus of spectacle, and he is comfortable with the dirtier parts of the job, casually giving Tarver her first assignment, investigating a fellow agent under the guise of acting as her partner on a missing persons case. This agent, Maria Halperin, gets her introduction via the absurdly long route Anne takes to get to her office tucked away in the basement of the same building. She barely notices Anne when she enters, too engrossed in her work, and when she does, doesn't take particular interest. She cares about getting the job done more than making friends and politicking. And there's our setup. A missing teenage boy, a dedicated detective working in obscurity, a higher-up power broker stabbing her in the back, and Anne in the middle of it all, clearly conflicted, but doing what she is ordered to do. If it's not already apparent, this whole game is non-voiced, but through a growingly complex series of expressions, symbols, environmental flourishes, and character decisions, Virginia manages to tell a complex story about the effort it takes to improve yourself and make the world a better place. I can't go further without spoilers, so this is where you pause the game and play it if you haven't already. It's less than 2 hours long, and at its highest price, it costs less than a movie ticket. Okay, so I've wanted to make this video for a while because I found this game deeply emotionally affecting, mostly based on an interpretation of the story I actually haven't found anyone saying anywhere else on the internet. I think that Virginia is a tragedy about someone taking a woefully inadequate half measure, masquerading as the triumphant self-growth story that she wants it to be. This is told most overtly through the story's symbols, and that's how I'm going to frame most of my analysis. First, we have masks, a false version of ourselves that we project into the world. There's the turn of phrase, putting your face on for applying makeup, and when Anne does this in the beginning, it's definitely supposed to be viewed from that lens. We see her later throw away her lipstick, showing she's struggling with this public persona she puts on. Something about her outer self is not vibing with her inner self. The inner self has its own symbol as well in locks. The earliest thing we see after the opening credits is someone locking up a box with a particular key. Though the hands in this shot are not Anne's, evidenced by a wedding ring, we will see Anne carrying this same key throughout the game, albeit with most of the blade broken off. Early on, as we assist Maria in the investigation to find a missing teenager, Lucas Fairfax, we search his parents' home and in the process find a locked door at the end of the house. This, coupled with the hidden photo developing studio in Lucas's room, suggests a distrust for someone in the house who is hiding something. Both detectives will later find a box with some negatives in this office that show Lucas's father kissing a teenager. Then we have the buffalo. On the way home on the first night of the investigation, Maria almost runs into a buffalo in the middle of the street. Later that same night, we see Anne dreaming that she is in a car with Cord driving directly into Maria as she almost did with the buffalo. The buffalo clearly has a connection to Maria, but I don't think its full significance makes sense without examining the way that Anne and Maria's relationship develops. At first, Maria is distrusting or otherwise dismissive of her new sidekick. Despite this, Anne is able to learn a few things about Maria. Searching her glove box while getting gas, she finds 2 pieces of mail listing 2 different last names, suggesting a recent divorce that is later confirmed. She later finds a locket containing a picture of an older woman in Maria's office. She does some research in the FBI archives and finds that this is Maria's mother, Judith, who was forced out of the FBI because she was investigating misdeeds of higher-ups, probably including Cord. At the same time, trust builds between Anne and Maria as the investigation unfolds. Examining Lucas's sketchbook, they find playful drawings of a UFO, but also what appears to be a local cave. They investigate the cave and find a cardinal locked in a cage behind some wooden planks. The two share a nice moment with it, but are interrupted by falling debris. Maria pushes Anne out of the way, taking an injury herself instead. A warmness develops between the two. They start to spend time drinking together on the water tower after work. Anne spends the night on Maria's couch, discovering that her apartment used to belong to Judith, and we see her life story play out room by room. She was a radical young woman before she joined the agency, and after being dismissed from it, lived the rest of her life in obscurity before she passed away. Anne also finds a locked room in the apartment, but doesn't know what's inside. The two continue unwinding the mystery, staking out a nearby observatory to find a large procession of military vehicles, suggesting the involvement of a general Anne sees in the elevator at the FBI, followed by the campaign vehicle of a local politician. Just how deep does this go? Are they in league with the pedophile preacher? Is the local sheriff involved? Is it connected to Cord's misdeeds and Judith's investigation that got her dismissed? Throughout all this, the buffalo gains weight as a stand-in for Maria, but perhaps more precisely, Anne's guilt towards her role in Maria's life. She is investigating Maria and will write up a thorough report on everything she discovers. Towards the end of the second act, Maria is on her way to give Anne a large stuffed buffalo she's bought when she discovers Anne's documents of her behavior in the backseat of the car. She leaves Anne stranded at the gas station. Now, finally, there's the importance of the color red. There is a sinister red glow in many of Anne's dreams, first peeking through what looked like slats of a closet door and later billowing out of a large furnace. In the course of the detective's investigation, they find a group of teenagers smoking by the tunnel where they found the bird. One accosts Maria, grabs her necklace, and throws it into the nearby military land surrounded by no trespassing signs. When this teen is arrested, Anne processes his belongings, discovering 7 tabs of LSD in his wallet. She places 6 in evidence, but puts a 7th in a bright red envelope, pocketing it for later. At another point in the story, in a bid to regain Maria's favor after she discovers the documents, Anne braves the forbidden military complex, falling from a tree and hitting her head on the way in. When going through a rain tunnel after this, she hears an otherworldly sound and sees a harsh red glow. We're meant to draw a connection to the UFO in Lucas's sketchbook. Then finally, there's the bird Anne rescues, the cardinal. After the two recuperate, they find it dead in the station's morgue before it jolts awake, jumps to attention, and flies away. She will see it again, though. She finds it dead in a furnace in one of her dreams, surrounded by missing posters of Lucas. When she first finds the box of negatives in the Rembrandt's desk, the box has a dead cardinal in it, though it is nowhere to be seen when they open the box later. And finally, in another dream, the cardinal is dead on the ground at the same gas station where Maria left Anne in the lurch, with the large buffalo looking at her judgmentally. When she reaches for the bird, it transforms into Maria's locket of Judith. Now, it's messy, but the most broadly I could put it is that red represents the truest evil in this story and everything surrounding it, both the terrifying nature of it and perhaps the hope there is in overcoming it. So now we can get into the final act. Anne initially continues her task of investigating her partner after falling out of favor. She breaks into Maria's house and discovers in the locked room that there is a conspiracy board zeroing in on Cord. She is continuing her mother's work. Anne takes what evidence she can and is ready to give it all to Cord before deciding better of it, going back to Maria and saying to hell with it. Maria then hands Anne the LSD envelope, revealing that she also broke into Anne's apartment and stole it. Having made some modicum of peace with each other, Cord then discovers the whole thing and has the two arrested. In jail, Anne reflects on what her life would look like if she changes her mind and goes through with betraying Maria after all. She sees her life unfolding, making close friendships with the people she works with, only to have to stab all of them in the back for Cord's benefit. She gets a lot of people, mostly people of color, kicked out of the agency, and ends up successful but very lonely at the end of it. She does not choose this this future. Instead, she decides to take out the acid and start tripping. After a long walk down a glowing cave, Anna arrives at a ceremony of cult members with the general, sheriff, priest, politician, and deputy director standing in a place of prominence as a masked woman ritualistically sacrifices a buffalo. Anna attempts to interrupt the ceremony and save the buffalo's life before flashing into the heads of each of the game's major villains. She imagines the sheriff as a silly man with a temper the length of a fingernail, a politician unable to escape his emptiness outside a crowd, the general incapable of sharing any affection with his son, Horde living a deeply boring life with his only point of connection being his long-suffering secretary, and the pastor is an evil man who has lost the respect of both his wife and son. These are pitiful people, and she doesn't want to be among them. But when she flashes back to the sacrifice, the bull is dead, and she is the masked woman. She pulls the mask away, the friendly face she wore as she did the bidding of her corrupt higher-ups, and drops it. It briefly stares back at her before we learn where that key she's carried with her the whole game comes from. Now I'm going to split things up a little bit here at the end. I'm going to give first what I think is a popular positive interpretation of this game. It's an amalgamation of the plot synopsis the Wikipedia editors settled on, forum posts that got cited by Polygon on their article on this game's ending, and quotes from the game's director in that same article saying that most of the interpretations he saw were positive. So I'm combining some things to make the best case I can for this game having a happy ending. Because despite not personally resonating with an interpretation like this, it's still a piece of my much less optimistic takeaway. After Anne drops her mask, we flash to her in a room with her father on his deathbed. She shows him her badge, and he smiles but looks troubled. He gestures towards the closet, handing her that key we've seen the whole game, and tells her to burn what she finds. Inside is a red box, the one from the beginning, the one that the tip of the key breaks off in the lock of. She sees something horrifying inside and burns it on his orders. And when we return once again to the buffalo, we see her mask break, because she will no longer be an active part of this conspiracy. She can't put on the mask and do it anymore. She is no longer the person that destroyed that evidence on her father's orders. I didn't give this its own section earlier, but I think references to aliens and the bluish-green color often associated with them has what I'd for now call a broad association with hope. There's a dream earlier in the game where Anne sees Maria enter the locked room in her apartment, and she sees the same color. But the color plays a far more central role in the acid trip. After the sacrifice, the roof comes off the top of the building with ominous music playing in that same color. We then get a scene of Lucas in the woods observing a flying saucer. Judith steps out of a beam of light emanating from it, grabs Lucas's hand, and takes him into it with her. Then we get a brief scene of the same field and Lucas running into the woods alone with no UFO. The dream fades out and Anne leaves behind her key at the diner, leaving behind the burden of her corrupt dad as both women are free of the FBI. As the pair drives out of town, they pass a hitchhiker on the road with a striking resemblance to Lucas as the music swells and we cut to the credits. Anne has escaped, Maria has escaped, and the legacy of Judith is that someone like Lucas is able to be free of a bad situation. Thank you, Brendan Chung. I do not find this analysis satisfying. The ending of the game just didn't make me feel happy. It's so unsettling watching these two characters just barrel past the person they've been searching for the whole game. I so desperately wanted them to pull over. I don't read that as that literally being Lucas on the side of the road, but I think the whole ending makes sense as an extension of that feeling, declaring victory while leaving the real work undone. I don't think Anne leaving the key behind just means moving on. What she destroyed was deeply important to the lies that destroyed Maria's mother's life. I think making peace would involve admitting to Maria what she's done, possibly portrayed by giving Maria the key, but there's nothing to suggest that she does something like this. Let's go back further. As Anne's mask falls to the ground, we see her with her dad, and he gestures sadly towards the closet. I didn't read this as an order. I think this game is precise enough that giving the key signals a desire to be seen on a deeper level. If he wanted the box destroyed, she wouldn't have needed to unlock it. She is faced by her father on his deathbed, who she clearly wants to make proud, and he reaches out to her to be seen for his darkest moments. I read this as him saying, "Do with it what you will." I also prefer this reading because it gives Anne agency, and she uses that agency to make the wrong choice. She chooses to destroy the evidence. The key breaks in the lock as she will never be able to forget what she saw inside there, but she chooses to destroy its physical presence so it cannot destroy her father's reputation or tarnish her career. The bull is dead by her hand because despite her protests, despite her coming to care for Maria and drawing the line at continuing to spy on her, she is responsible for destroying evidence that could have vindicated dedicated the work that her mother left unfinished to the grave. Evidence that might have put Lucas's father behind bars and saved him from the horrors of having to flee home. Her guilt is dead, worthless in the face of her cowardice. I think the Cardinal is a hope that Anne will find the strength to fight back against the evil she's complicit in. It is alive when she finds it in the morgue and begins to form a meaningful relationship with Maria, but it is dead when surrounded by missing posters of Lucas and when it transforms into the locket of Judith, two previous casualties of her inaction. And it is dead here at the end among the shattered fragments of her mask. She sees that she can't actively do the conspiracy anymore. She sees the hollowness of her co-conspirators, but it's not liberation to be rid of the mask. What she sees under it is still a coward. And rather than accept this, her brain shifts towards fantasy. I said this blue symbolizes a hope, but I think more specifically it's a false hope, and grasping at whatever explanation allows her to save her ego. That the forces that pushed Judith out of the FBI and those that protected Lucas's father from consequences were beyond her control or even comprehension. But they weren't, and we get a shot afterwards of Luke running through the woods, a real child driven away from his home, downstream from her inaction. When she imagines encountering a flying saucer in the same location earlier in the story, the light is a harsh red. I framed the story at the beginning as this dichotomy between Maria and Cord, with Anne somewhat trapped in the middle. And by the end, Anne is not Cord. She can't do that anymore. But she is deciding to be passive, to step away from her active harm. Thus, she's also not Maria. She is not sticking her neck out to do the work that saves lives and to continue the work of a parent she is genuinely proud of. While she ends the game changed in that she's given up the dream of the FBI, she is still the same coward that burned that box and leaves the key behind. Yes, with the recognition of that failure, but not by atoning for it. In the end, they speed away from Lucas, tragically left behind. I said that the previous interpretation strengthens this one because it shows the narrative that Anne is trying to weave for herself, while still remaining an incomplete picture. I find this interpretation powerful because while I've never covered up an FBI conspiracy, I find something deeply relatable in coming to a greater clarity of your own faults and still lacking either the courage or strength to improve in the ways you know you need to. I am someone who is used to argumentative writing though, and I fear bits of this video come across as me giving my definitive decoding of this work. I love Virginia for the ways that it interacted with so many different themes, such that it could affect someone else so deeply who could view the story totally different from me based on their own history and points of emotional resonance. As I said, I want people to play this game because I want others to talk to about it, so please share your thoughts below. And if you've stuck around this far, please drop this video a like and subscribe.